Today, we invite you to listen to a story. Right after a lavish wedding, I thought my new life would begin in warmth and happiness. Who would have thought that after just one night as a bride, my mother-in-law would suddenly snatch my $200,000 wedding trust card, sweetly claiming she would keep it safe for me. But when I secretly called the bank to freeze the card, the very next morning, my in-laws bombarded my phone with 105 missed calls. And it was at that exact moment I realized I had just touched upon a shocking secret they had kept hidden for years. If you want to discover the truth behind this story, please sit back, listen, and enjoy it right now. My name is Tessa, 29 years old, and I had been married for exactly one day. My husband, Nathan, was the only son of Eleanor, a sharp-tongued woman who spoke softly but always had eyes as cold as ice. At our wedding yesterday, all the relatives praised me for hitting the jackpot because my husband's family was wealthy, and Nathan himself was a branch manager at a regional bank. But people didn't know that on the very first morning after my wedding, I would learn the true price of marrying into this family. That morning, I had just changed out of my pajamas and was heading down to the kitchen to make a warm cup of lemon water when I saw Eleanor already standing in the living room. In her hand, she held the red velvet box, the box containing the $200,000 gift card and trust documents my parents had presented to me in front of all the wedding guests. She offered a smile as thin as paper, her voice light and breezy. "Tessa, honey, wedding gifts are money from the elders for you two to build your future. I think since you're newly married, keeping such a large sum of money makes you an easy target for scammers. Let me hold on to it for you to keep it safe." I stood frozen. The phrase "keep it safe" sounded sweet, but tasted bitter. "Mom, but that money was given specifically to me by my parents," I said softly, trying to remain polite. "Well, yes, they gave it to you, but you're part of this family now. Isn't it much safer if I hold on to it?" she replied, her eyes never leaving mine. Just then, Nathan walked out of the hallway. Hearing the conversation, he chuckled. "Mom's right, babe. That money is for our long-term future. Let Mom keep it in the family safe. It's better to have an elder manage it so we don't do anything reckless." I stared at him, dumbfounded. We hadn't even been married for 24 hours, and they were already singing the exact same tune. A chill ran down my spine. Eleanor held out her hand, her posture indicating that I had no choice but to hand it over. Suppressing my anger, I gave her the box. She smiled, turned around, and walked upstairs to her master suite. I heard the sharp, decisive click of her door locking. That evening at dinner, Eleanor happily passed me a piece of roasted salmon, her voice incredibly gentle. "Eat up, honey. Wake up early tomorrow and go to the farmer's market with me. You have to learn how to run a household from the little things." I had a hard time swallowing the food and managed a forced smile. Nathan sat next to me, saying nothing, eating as if he couldn't feel the heavy, oppressive glare I was giving him. That night, when Nathan was fast asleep, I opened my phone and logged into my banking app. Under the linked accounts section, I saw the wedding trust card was still under my name, but there was a pending transaction. Someone had tried to swipe it through a POS terminal that afternoon, but the large amount had triggered a fraud hold. My heart pounded. She had clearly tried to use the card. With trembling hands, I dialed the bank's 24/7 fraud hotline. When the representative asked for the reason, I simply said, "The card is being held by an unauthorized user." A few minutes later, the system confirmed the card was frozen, and all funds were locked pending verification. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I knew the storm was just beginning. The next morning, the moment I opened my eyes, Nathan was standing in the doorway, his face dark with fury. "Did you freeze the card?" Mom said. The transaction was declined, and now she's completely humiliated in front of her business partners. I forced a smile. "That money is from my parents. It's a wedding gift for their daughter. I just locked it for safety." "Who told Mom she could go swipe it without asking me?" Nathan threw his phone onto the bed. "Are you accusing my mother of stealing? She was just trying to move it into a high-yield savings account for us." I looked at my husband, feeling a mix of pity and burning resentment. "Think about it, Nathan. If someone took $200,000 of your money and tried to move it without telling you, Would you just sit there peacefully?" He fell silent, then stormed out, slamming the door. I sat there in a daze, a lump in my throat. I hadn't even been a wife for 2 days, and I was already being treated like an ungrateful, unreasonable child. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop, and 105 missed calls. From my mother-in-law, from unknown numbers, and even from Nathan's aunts. The text messages flooded in. "You humiliated me over $200,000? You're so stingy with your own mother-in-law. I am crying from the disrespect." I burst into tears, but beneath the tears, a hardened resolve began to form. I knew that if I showed weakness today, they would trample all over me in the future. That afternoon, I drove to visit my parents. My mother looked at me, her eyes full of worry. "You just got married. Why do you look so exhausted?" I choked back tears and told them everything. My father listened in silence, then said firmly, "You did the right thing. That money is yours. No one has the right to take it under the guise of keeping it safe, just to misappropriate it. But you need to stay sharp, Tessa. They aren't going to let this go." I nodded. He was right. I never imagined that my first days of marriage would turn into a silent power struggle. When I returned to my in-laws' estate in Connecticut that evening, I found the door to my bedroom wide open. Eleanor was sitting in the living room, the empty red velvet box on the coffee table in front of her. She spoke, her voice as cold as steel. "Tessa, let me ask you straight. What are you planning to do with that $200,000? I was only holding it for you. I haven't touched a dime, and yet you freeze the card, triggering a fraud investigation on me. Do you know how humiliated I am?" I remained perfectly calm. "Mom, I only locked it temporarily because I was afraid of an error. Whenever you want to go to the bank to set up the savings account, we can go together." She gritted her teeth. "Are you accusing me of being a thief?" The air was heavy as lead. My hands shook slightly, but I kept my gaze steady. "I'm just sticking to basic financial principles, Mom. I'm not accusing anyone." She stayed silent for a moment, then let out a cold, mocking laugh. "Fine. I guess rich girls think their money makes them better than everyone else. Let's see how long you survive in this house." She stood up and walked away, leaving behind the suffocating scent of her heavy perfume. I slumped into the armchair, feeling like my heart was being squeezed. But I knew that from that very second, the war between my mother-in-law and me had officially begun. The next morning, I woke up to my door being pushed open. Maria, the housekeeper, stood hesitantly in the doorway, her voice trembling. Ma'am, Mrs. Eleanor told me to come up and strip the bed and gather your laundry." I frowned. "Strip the bed? Why so early?" She lowered her head and whispered. She said the master suite on the second floor is going to be Mr. Nathan's home office now. And you are to be moved to the spare room on the first floor, next to the pantry storage." I froze. Married for less than 3 days, and I was already being kicked out of the bridal suite. Without saying a word, I pulled on my cardigan and marched downstairs. Eleanor was sipping her morning Earl Grey tea, looking as serene as if nothing had happened. "Mom, why did you order my room changed?" I asked directly. She set her teacup down with a faint smile. "I noticed that room is right next to mine, and since you're new here and still clumsy, I thought the first floor room would be better. It's closer to the kitchen and the storage room. Won't it be easier for you to cook and clean? But I am Nathan's wife. How can you separate our bedroom?" Her voice suddenly dropped, her eyes piercing through me. "Wife or not, you need to learn respect. You've been in this house for 1 day, and you've already publicly humiliated me. I have to teach you how to behave from scratch." The room fell dead silent. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, though my hands were freezing. Nathan walked in from the garage. Seeing the scene, he furrowed his brow. "Mom, drop it. Tessa can stay wherever she wants." "Wherever she wants?" Eleanor snapped. "Your wife disrespects your mother, and you defend her?" Nathan instantly fell silent, avoiding my eyes. I smiled bitterly. The pain and humiliation swelled in my chest. So, the man I trusted, when caught between his mother and his wife, only knew how to bow his head in silence. At noon, while I was washing dishes, Maria leaned in and whispered, "Tessa, Mrs. Eleanor told me to pour extra salt into the soup you made. She said she needs to test if you're actually good at household chores. I felt bad for you, so I wanted to warn you. I stood frozen. A wave of suffocating resentment washed over me. People can be unloving, but to stoop to such petty sabotage was unbelievable. I served the soup anyway, saying nothing. Eleanor tasted it and immediately smacked her lips in disgust. This soup is pure salt. City girls only know how to put on makeup. You don't know the first thing about cooking. I looked at her and smiled. I guess I'm still getting used to the kitchen here. I'll do better tomorrow. She sneered. Don't bother. From tomorrow on, you don't need to cook. There are plenty of other chores in this house that need doing. That afternoon, after I finished doing the laundry, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered it. Is this Tessa? I'm the lead accountant at Nathan's bank branch. I wanted to ask, why is the $200,000 transfer that his mother requested flagged for fraud? I went silent for a few seconds before replying. I didn't authorize any transfer. That is my private wedding trust card. The voice on the other end dropped. Oh, I understand now. But she's causing a massive scene at the bank right now, screaming that you embezzled her money. The whole branch is gossiping about it. I gripped the phone tightly, my palms sweating. Just as my dad had warned, they weren't going to let this go. I sat in a daze the entire afternoon, my head pounding. The feeling of being publicly slandered and humiliated made me want to scream, but I couldn't. When Nathan got home that evening, his face was as cold as stone. He threw his briefcase onto the table, his voice harsh. Are you happy now? Mom was humiliated in front of my entire staff. She almost fainted at the bank today because of that card. What did I do wrong, Nathan? I asked, my voice choking. Who told her she could take my private money to the bank without asking me? You are petty. You are selfish. You have no respect. Nathan gritted out every word. I laughed, tears finally spilling over. If I were a stranger, you'd believe whatever your mother said without question. He turned his back and didn't answer. That cold silhouette made me feel like I was living with a complete stranger. Night fell. I sat alone in the cramped, damp first-floor room. Outside, rain pattered against the window. Inside, the only sound was the click-clack of Eleanor's heels, pacing on the second floor. I looked at the locked bank card in my purse, my heart heavy as a boulder. I knew she wouldn't stop here. Sure enough, the next morning when I opened the front door, 2 middle-aged women, Nathan's aunts, were waiting on the porch. One of them immediately started scolding me. A new daughter-in-law making demands of her mother-in-law. What a disgrace. This family is only respectable because of Eleanor. The other chimed in, I heard you locked the wedding trust card and humiliated your mother-in-law. Is that how you act as a wife? I bit my lip, knowing full well this was Eleanor's tactic to pressure me, but I remained polite. Aunties, that was a misunderstanding. I only locked it temporarily for security reasons. Save your excuses. In this house, what Eleanor says is the law. If you keep being stubborn, you better watch your back. They left the threat hanging in the air, their eyes full of implication. I realized they wanted me to unlock the card myself, as a sign of submission. That afternoon, Nathan didn't come home. I sat eating dinner alone. Maria whispered, Mr. Nathan went out to dinner with his mother. I heard they're discussing how to handle the trust fund issue. I smiled sadly, feeling an overwhelming, terrifying sense of isolation. I only had a marriage certificate to prove I was his wife. In reality, I had no place in this house. That night, Eleanor knocked on my door. Tessa, I know you're angry, but you need to listen to me about this money. I was going to put it in a high-yield CD. When you get pregnant and have a baby, I was going to give you the principal plus the interest. Now, I just need you to unlock the card. I looked up at her, my voice calm but firm. Mom, I'm not angry. I just want transparency. When you need it, I will go with you to the bank, but with my permission, and I will hold the card. She stood perfectly still, her lips pressed into a thin line. After a moment, she gave a slight nod, a half-smile creeping onto her face. I understand. Rich girls are used to relying on their money. I won't force you. But remember this clearly. You are living in my house. If you want to survive here, you need to learn to bow your head. With that, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, a freezing dread rising inside me. I knew tonight was just the prelude. The real war was about to begin. 3 days later, Eleanor hosted a large family dinner at the house. Over a dozen relatives sat around the long table, their faces stern. Only Eleanor looked radiant, her voice as sweet as honey. "Eat up, everyone. It's been a while since we all got together. And it's a good time for me to bring up something about our new daughter-in-law, so everyone can give her some advice and help her mature." I froze. A bad premonition made my heart race. She said give advice, but her eyes were as sharp as daggers. Just as people picked up their forks, she casually set her wine glass down, looked around the room and said, "My daughter-in-law is educated and comes from money, but it seems she hasn't learned how to be a part of a family. It's a small thing, but it embarrassed me deeply." One of the aunts looked up. "What happened, Eleanor?" She sighed, her voice laced with manufactured victimhood. "Her parents gave her a $200,000 trust card for the wedding. I just offered to keep it safe for her. Who would have thought she'd freeze the card, triggering a fraud investigation on me at the bank? Outsiders are laughing in my face, saying the mother-in-law is trying to steal from the bride. It hurts so much." The table erupted in whispers. Someone gasped, "Oh my God. A daughter-in-law dared to do that? How disrespectful. Girls these days have no shame." I sat perfectly still, my fingers intertwined tightly in my lap. Eleanor glanced at me, pretending to wipe away a tear. "I love her so much," I thought. "Since she's new to the family, I shouldn't be harsh. But she's stubborn. She speaks to me as if she's the one in charge." I wasn't given a chance to speak. Every word she said was a knife aimed straight at my dignity. An uncle turned to me, his voice harsh. "Tessa, you're a daughter-in-law now. You have to respect your elders. If your mother-in-law wants to keep it safe, it's because she's looking out for your future." I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Uncle, I never doubted Mom's intentions. It's just that we hadn't discussed it clearly, so I locked it temporarily. I planned to go to the bank with her, so we could be on the same page." Eleanor immediately cut in. "See? Still arguing. You say we hadn't discussed it clearly, implying I did something wrong." She slammed her hand on the table. "Do you think just because it's your money, you can do whatever you want? Have you forgotten whose house you are in?" The tension was so thick, people stopped breathing. Nathan sat next to me, his face blank, refusing to look at me even once. I turned to him and whispered, "Nathan, please say something." "I didn't do anything wrong." He just shook his head and muttered, "Shut up, Tessa. Don't make it worse." I laughed bitterly. In that moment, I realized I was standing in the middle of a battlefield without a single ally. Eleanor stood up, looking around the table. "I didn't want to cause family drama, but if my daughter-in-law doesn't know her place, I have to teach her. Whoever heard of a married woman valuing her money more than family loyalty?" An older aunt chimed in, "Exactly. A woman has to learn to compromise. Don't try to outsmart your mother-in-law." My eyes burned. They had no idea. I just wanted basic fairness, but in their eyes, I was already the spoiled, wicked daughter-in-law. The dinner ended in a heavy silence. Before I could even leave the table, Eleanor dropped another bucket of ice water on me. "Starting tomorrow, you are going to go work at Nathan's bank branch. I already spoke to them. You'll be a junior teller. The pay is low, but it will teach you some humility." I was stunned. "What? But I already have a career at my own logistics firm." "Why would I?" "Because you are part of this family now, and everything will be arranged by me," she cut me off. "Besides, the money you make out there might not be clean. People say you only got rich riding your parents' coattails. That's nothing to be proud of." I choked on my anger. She wasn't just humiliating me, she was directly insulting my parents' integrity, but I couldn't react. Any act of defiance now would just dig me deeper into the hole. That night, lying in the basement-level spare room, my tears soaked the pillow. I remembered my mother and my father's warning, "You have to stay sharp. Don't let them turn you into the villain." I took a deep breath and wiped my tears. If she wanted to test me, I would show her I was not weak. The next morning, I arrived at Nathan's bank branch. The entire office was whispering. The VP's wife got demoted by her mother-in-law to work as a teller, rich girl getting put in her place. I ignored them and buried myself in the work. But right before lunch, Eleanor showed up. She walked into the lobby exuding absolute authority. She spoke loudly enough for the whole branch to hear. "Everyone, please help out my daughter-in-law. She needs to learn where she stands. Don't let her wealth make her arrogant." The staff offered awkward, forced smiles. No one dared look me in the eye. I felt my face burning. She didn't need to strike me. Just a few calculated words were enough to publicly degrade me. That afternoon, when I returned home, I was too exhausted to even eat. Nathan was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone in silence. I sat down, my voice soft. "Can we talk?" He looked up, his voice dry. "You've hurt my mother too much. She just wants what's best for you. Why can't you just take a step back?" I looked at him, my voice choking. "Do you realize your mother is actively humiliating me? I'm not fighting for power. I just want to be respected." He sighed, standing up. "Think whatever you want, but stop making my mother sad." He walked upstairs, the door clicking shut, leaving me completely alone in that cold, empty house. Late that night, Maria knocked softly on my door. "Tessa, I need to tell you something." Mrs. Eleanor called someone from the bank over. They said tomorrow she's going to initiate a $200,000 wire transfer from your locked card. She apparently found a loophole to bypass the freeze. I jolted upright, my heart racing. I checked my banking app. The screen showed a notification. Identity verification requested by co-resident for account unfreeze. 24-hour hold initiated. I went rigid. She had used her connections in the banking industry to force an override. I immediately called the fraud hotline to dispute it, but the representative said, "Ma'am, the request was initiated by an authorized resident at your registered address. We are legally required to hold the unfreeze for 24 hours to verify." I slumped into my chair. She had calculated this far better than I thought. She knew I was vulnerable and lacked the evidence to permanently secure the card. I remembered her triumphant smirk at the dinner table. Clearly, everything today was part of her plan. Humiliate me, force me into submission, and finally, seize the money. But she did one thing that erased all my fear. I quietly opened a voice recording app on my phone, recorded the entire phone call with the bank representative, and sent a copy to my father. I sent a short text. "Dad, I need your help to protect what belongs to me." Once the message was sent, I sat perfectly still in the dark. I wasn't trembling anymore. I knew that starting tomorrow, I wouldn't be fighting this war alone. The next morning, the house was bustling with footsteps. I had just stepped out of my room when I heard Eleanor yelling from the second floor. "Nathan! Get down here right now! I need to ask you something." Her voice was as sharp as a scalpel. I paused, sensing disaster. When I reached the living room, I saw her holding a smartphone. On the screen was the exact audio file I had sent my dad the night before. She slammed the phone onto the coffee table, hissing, "What is the meaning of this, Tessa? You recorded me?" I was stunned for a split second, cold sweat dripping down my back. Someone had intercepted the recording and sent it to her. There was only one person who could have done that: Nathan. He was standing behind his mother, his face stone cold, avoiding my eyes. I realized he must have seen the message on my synced iPad or intercepted it somehow, and assuming I was trying to sue his mother, he handed the evidence right over to her. I tried to stay calm, my voice low. "I only recorded the call with the bank to clarify the unauthorized access. I had no intention of harming you, Mom. I was just afraid of a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" She barked a laugh. "You speak as if you're so innocent. Were you planning to send this to your daddy to sue me?" She stepped closer, pointing a finger in my face. "From the day you stepped foot into this house, I haven't had a good night's sleep. Do you think I don't see what you're doing? You're playing the good, obedient wife to win Nathan over, all so you can keep a tight grip on that card." I shook my head, tears welling up. I never wanted to take anything from anyone. I just want to be respected. "Respected?" she sneered. "What you want is control. You want to make your mother-in-law look like a greedy thief, don't you?" Nathan stepped in, his voice stiff. "Mom, that's enough. I don't think Tessa meant any harm. She whipped around and glared at him. Shut up. You're so spineless you let your own wife walk all over us. She's capable of recording us, and you're still defending her. The air in the house was suffocating. I could feel every heavy breath. Maria, the housekeeper, was hiding behind the kitchen wall, looking terrified. I felt a wave of crushing resentment paralyze me. Mom, I just want to explain. My voice trembled. Explain? She scoffed. Fine. Explain it to the police. I just called my contact at the local precinct. They're coming over to file a report for suspected financial fraud. Did you think locking that card was the end of it? My heart pounded. I knew she wasn't bluffing. With her connections, just one phone call could have me investigated. But instead of fear, a wave of pure anger washed over me. I lifted my head and looked straight into her eyes. If you think I committed fraud, I am more than ready to speak to the police. But I want to remind you, Mom, that money is a wedding trust from my parents to me. If you dare move a single cent of it, I will press charges to the absolute end. Those words acted like a spark to a powder keg. Eleanor's face darkened. She raised her hand, about to slap me, but Nathan caught her wrist. Mom, stop it. Don't go too far. Get out of my way, she screamed. Look at her. Your wife is threatening your mother. I looked at her, calmly and coldly. I am not threatening you. I am protecting what is mine. If you want to test me, go right ahead. The silence that followed was terrifying. Her eyes flashed with absolute fury, but then she took a deep breath, suppressing it, and let out a cold laugh. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If you dare to go against me, you're going to learn exactly what it means to be a daughter-in-law in this family. She turned on her heel, her shoes clicking sharply against the hardwood floor like hammer strikes. Nathan let go of her arm and collapsed onto the sofa, sighing heavily. Tessa, why do you always have to make things worse? My mom is hot-tempered. The more you argue, the more stubborn she gets. I gave a hollow laugh. So, in your opinion, I should just stay quiet and let her take whatever she wants? He remained silent, unable to answer. I looked at him and saw nothing but a weak man who didn't dare protect his wife, nor had the courage to discern right from wrong. I turned away, the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. That afternoon, Eleanor called Maria. From now on, Tessa is not allowed to touch any of the household funds. If she wants to buy anything or eat anything, she has to ask for permission. Maria hesitated. Yes, ma'am. But what about her own money? If she has her own money, she can spend it, but she is not to use a dime of this family's money. I heard everything, but instead of arguing, I quietly went up to my room, opened my drawer, and took out an envelope containing my severance pay from my old logistics job that I had saved. I knew I had to keep my head held high, no matter how much they tried to crush me. That evening, I called my dad. He spoke concisely. Stay calm. I've already had my lawyers contact the bank. No one is authorized to touch that trust fund, but you need to be careful. These people won't just attack your finances. His warning was prophetic. Sure enough, that night, Eleanor unleashed her next move. Around 8 p.m., she called Nathan into the living room and told him to put his phone on speaker. When I walked out, she was on a call with a man who loudly introduced himself as a real estate developer. Yes, Eleanor, what's going on with that $200,000 deposit for the property we discussed? I froze. She calmly replied, my daughter-in-law froze the card. She won't authorize the wire transfer, so we'll have to cancel the contract. The man on the phone chuckled darkly. So you scammed me. I've already reported this to the authorities. You better prepare yourself. I was stunned. She hung up the phone, turned to me, and spoke with a voice like steel. See that? You locked the card, and now people think I'm a fraud. You just made me default on a massive debt. Nathan went pale. Mom, what deposit? I didn't know anything about this. I was trying to buy a plot of land for you too. But thanks to your wife, now I'm facing a lawsuit. I stiffened. The timing was entirely too perfect. It was glaringly obvious she had staged this whole performance to pin the blame on me. I looked at her and said slowly, if there really is a contract, I would like to see the paperwork. She faltered for a second, then scoffed. Are you calling your mother a liar? No, I just want transparency. It's my money. I have the right to know where it's going. She stood in silence for a few seconds, then turned away, her voice flat. Fine. You want to play the legal game? I'll oblige. Tomorrow, I invite you to come to the police station with me so we can clear this all up. With that, she marched upstairs. Nathan looked at me, his eyes hollow. Tessa, I am so exhausted. I just smiled and walked back to my basement room. All my emotions had evaporated, leaving behind nothing but cold, calculating clarity. I knew Eleanor wanted to push me to the brink, but little did she know, I was no longer that weak, compliant bride. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled the footage from the home security cameras that I had discreetly backed up to a hard drive. I discovered something that made my blood run cold. There was a clip of Eleanor calling that same man earlier in the day, explicitly instructing him to fake the real estate contract to intimidate her daughter-in-law. I stared at the screen, my fists clenched, my heart pounding. The fear in my eyes was entirely gone, replaced by a single, focused thought. Tomorrow morning, I am flipping the board. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, but the house felt suffocatingly cold. I woke up early, the anxiety completely erased from my face. I hadn't slept at all. I spent the entire night staring at the security footage, memorizing every word Eleanor had spoken to that man. Her voice had been as sweet as ever, but the content was chilling. Just tell her I made the deposit and she blocked the funds. Let the police come ask her questions. Scare her a little. It's not a real debt. Hearing it for the third time, I stopped trembling. I knew exactly what I had to do. When I stepped into the living room, Eleanor was already sitting on the sofa, dressed impeccably, a red file folder resting on the coffee table. Next to her was a man in a suit, looking very much like a lawyer. Nathan was there too, looking grim. She looked at me and offered a mocking smile. Are you ready? Let's go talk to the authorities. I already called them here to verify the frozen funds. I gave a slight nod. Yes, I also want to clear everything up. She raised an eyebrow, a flash of surprise crossing her face. Perhaps she didn't expect me to be so calm. About 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up to the driveway. 2 officers stepped out, greeted everyone, and walked inside. Eleanor enthusiastically poured them coffee, her voice as light as a breeze. Thank you so much for coming, officers. It's just a small misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law accidentally locked a bank card, which caused a real estate transaction to be canceled. I just want to get it sorted out. One of the officers opened his notepad. Yes, ma'am. We'll take statements to verify. But if you have concrete evidence, that would speed things up. I looked straight ahead, my voice clear. I have evidence, and I would like permission to present it. The room went dead silent. Eleanor frowned. What evidence? Are you planning to fabricate something else? I didn't answer. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and plugged it directly into the smart TV in the living room. The screen lit up. I played the video from the night before. Eleanor's voice echoed clearly through the room. Just tell her I made the deposit and she blocked the funds. Let the police come ask her questions. Scare her a little. The room exploded. Eleanor sprang to her feet, her face draining of all color. Nathan stood paralyzed, staring at his mother, unable to believe his ears. The 2 officers exchanged a look, and one spoke up. Ma'am, is that your voice? Eleanor stammered. I was just joking. It wasn't real. I remained calm. Officers, this is from the indoor security camera in my living room. It has the date, time, and clear audio. I have never sent this to anyone. I only kept it to protect myself. The officer nodded. We will confiscate a copy of this for review. If this is accurate, you are presenting a fabricated scenario and filing a false report. Eleanor stumbled back and collapsed onto the sofa, her face white as a sheet, her lips trembling. You dared to record me? I answered softly, but every word hit like a hammer. I didn't want to, but I was forced to, because I was too trusting. Nathan stood frozen, unable to utter a single word. After a long moment, he sighed, his voice cracking. Mom, why would you do this? She turned to her son. tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to secure that money for you. I was afraid she would steal from you." I laughed bitterly. I didn't steal from anyone. That trust fund was a wedding gift from my parents, given exclusively to me. You claimed you were keeping it safe, then took my card to set up a fake contract to falsely accuse me of embezzlement. If you actually loved your son, you never would have done this. My voice wasn't loud, but the entire house was pin-drop silent. One of the officers spoke up gently. "We see that there are signs of misconduct here, so we will record statements from both parties regarding the false report. As for the trust fund, that is a civil matter, and we advise the family to settle it privately." After the police left, the atmosphere in the house felt like the roof had caved in. Eleanor sat in silence, staring blankly ahead. Nathan didn't dare look up. I looked at them, feeling no triumph, just an immense emptiness. I spoke slowly. "Mom, I don't want to drag this out. If you want to save face, I can withdraw my complaint about the false report and pretend this never happened. But the condition is that you cease all interference with my assets permanently." She remained silent, her hands clasped tightly together. After a long while, she whispered, her voice exhausted, "You won. Do whatever you want. I'm old. I surrender." I sighed. I didn't want to win. I just wanted peace. With that, I walked upstairs, every step feeling as heavy as stone. I didn't hate her, but I knew the boundary between family and calculation in this house had been irrevocably shattered. That afternoon, Nathan knocked on my door. He stood silently for a moment before speaking softly. "I'm sorry. My mom goes too far sometimes, but she loves me in her own twisted way. I don't know what else to say." I looked at him, my eyes blurring with tears. "Do you know? I didn't need you to fight her for me. I just needed you to be fair. But you stayed silent the entire time, and it made me feel completely alone." He bowed his head and sighed. "I know, but I am an only child caught between the two women I love. I didn't know whose side to take." I smiled a sad, broken smile. "You didn't need to take a side. You just needed to stand on the side of what was right." He fell silent and walked away, leaving me with a freezing, empty void. That night, Eleanor didn't come down for dinner. Maria whispered, "She's been in her room all day, hasn't eaten a thing." I heard her crying. Hearing that, my heart tied into a knot. I didn't hate her, I was just so tired. But regardless, I couldn't pretend the things she had done never happened. Late that night, I went out to the backyard and sat looking at the dim patio lights. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was choked with emotion. "Sweetheart, your dad heard the news. He said you are incredibly brave. But honey, don't let resentment destroy your peace of mind. If you're exhausted, just come home. Mom and Dad will always welcome you." I stayed silent, tears streaming down my face. I knew I would have to face a lot more, because a woman like Eleanor wouldn't easily accept defeat. But at least today, I had stood firmly on my own 2 feet. In the living room, the lights were still on. Eleanor was sitting there, staring at a framed wedding photo of Nathan and me, her eyes vacant. No one knew what she was thinking, except that her lips were barely moving. This daughter-in-law is not as simple as I thought. And I, sitting in that cramped basement room, whispered to myself, "If you choose war, Mom, I will not retreat. But if you want peace, I will still call you Mom." I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of calm. But deep down, a vague premonition surfaced. I knew the waves hadn't stopped, because for a woman like Eleanor, one lost hand is never the end of the game. After that day, I thought things would finally settle down, but the silence in the house was more terrifying than the storm. Eleanor stopped yelling. She didn't look at me, didn't say a harsh word, but that eerie quiet gave me the creeps. When a person like her stops fighting with her mouth, it means she's preparing to fight with strategy. For 3 consecutive days, Nathan left early for work and came home late. I barely saw him. He avoided all conversations. Meanwhile, Eleanor suddenly became uncharacteristically proper. She woke up early to cook breakfast, called Maria to help, and even occasionally knocked on my door, her voice sickeningly sweet. "What do you want to eat, honey? Let Mom make it for you." I understood immediately. People like her don't change overnight after a hard fall. This newfound gentleness was just the opening act for another scheme. On Thursday afternoon, while I was pruning the hydrangeas in the front yard, the gate swung open. An elegantly dressed woman walked in, looking very familiar. Eleanor rushed out to greet her, beaming brightly. "Oh my gosh, Margaret. You made it. It's been so long." I stopped in my tracks. Margaret. Just hearing the name sent a shiver down my spine. I vaguely remembered her. She was Eleanor's best friend, a real estate broker, notorious for being shrewd and calculating. Margaret turned to look at me, scanning me from head to toe, then smiled. "Is this the new daughter-in-law?" "She's pretty. Looks sharp, too." Eleanor was overly polite. "Yes, but sometimes being too sharp is a curse, you know? I just want my son and his wife to be stable." Who knew this little girl would blow up the trust fund issue and almost make me look like a thief? Margaret raised an eyebrow, looking at me with a half-mocking smile. "Oh, Tessa, right? You're young, but you're quite fierce, aren't you? But listen, every family has conflicts. Let it go for your mother-in-law. If you know how to treat her right, you'll be blessed later." I didn't reply, just offered a polite smile and walked away, but my internal alarms were blaring. 2 days later, Nathan came home looking exhausted. He dropped his briefcase and muttered, "Tessa, Mom is talking to Aunt Margaret about starting an investment firm. She wants you to contribute some capital as a way to bond the family." I was stunned. "Excuse me? Contribute capital? Where am I supposed to get that kind of money?" "Mom said to use your wedding trust fund, just as a symbolic gesture of being part of the family." I burst out laughing. It was the $200,000 card all over again. The cycle had returned to the exact starting point. Only this time she wasn't doing it directly. She was using an accomplice. I looked straight at Nathan, my voice ice cold. "Do you see the hypocrisy here? Mom just got exposed for trying to steal that money, and now she's demanding I invest it." Nathan stayed silent, avoiding my gaze. I knew he was trapped between the two sides, but his silence made me feel betrayed all over again. That night, I heard Eleanor and Margaret talking in the living room. The door was slightly ajar, and their voices were clear. "Don't worry," I talked to Nathan. "He'll definitely pressure Tessa into agreeing," Margaret said. "If she could lock the card, she can unlock it. We just need her to sign a few papers, pretend it's a nominal investment. In reality, we'll just float the cash to collect interest." "Yeah. Are you sure Nathan will go along with it?" Eleanor asked. "He's a mama's boy. He loves his mother more than his wife. Just watch." I stood behind the door, my hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My guess was right. Eleanor hadn't stopped. She wanted to legalize her theft of my trust fund under the guise of a family investment. I quietly pulled out my phone and recorded the entire conversation. Then, I stepped out, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Excuse me, let me make some tea." "Mom, what kind of tea does Margaret prefer?" They both jumped, slightly startled. Eleanor quickly regained her composure. "Oh, go ahead. I was just discussing some company business. It doesn't concern you." I smiled. "Yes, I know. But since the business you're discussing involves my money, I figured I should probably listen closely." Eleanor froze, her eyes flashing with rage. Margaret looked at me, her lips curling into a sneer. "You've got some nerve, little girl. But listen, Tessa, adult matters are none of your business. Your mother-in-law just wants to help you two build wealth." I set the tea tray down, my voice steady and clear. If she genuinely wanted to help, she wouldn't need to float cash or use nominal signatures. "I heard everything, Mom." Eleanor shot to her feet, her face bright red. "Were you eavesdropping?" "No, I was just walking by, but I heard every single word." Margaret scoffed. "You are brazen. But whatever, Eleanor. I'm heading out before this gets messy." She grabbed her designer bag and left, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in her wake. I looked at my mother-in-law. Our eyes met, one freezing cold, the other burning with rage. She gritted out, "Do you think you're so smart?" "I only wanted what's best for this family." I replied slowly. "Do you want what's best for this family, or what's best for your bank account?" She glared at me. "You have a filthy mouth. I raised my son for 20-some years. and you've been here a few months and dare to insult me. I am done bowing my head to you." I looked straight back. "I didn't insult you. I just spoke the truth. If you continue to scheme against me, I will not stay quiet." She gritted her teeth, pointing a finger in my face. "You've got a lot of nerve. You dare to go against me? I am going to show you exactly what it means to be a daughter-in-law in this house." She turned and slammed her bedroom door, her rapid footsteps pounding like hammers against my chest. That night, I sat alone in my room, my mind spinning. I knew that after this confrontation, she would stop at nothing. But this time, I wasn't alone. I texted my dad. "Dad, they're trying to legalize stealing my money using a fake investment contract. I have the audio recording. I need a lawyer." My dad replied almost instantly, "Stay calm. Don't do anything rash. I'll have someone fly into Chicago in 3 days." I put my phone down and looked up at the mirror. The face reflecting in the dark wasn't the weak, newlywed bride anymore. It was a woman learning how to fight against injustice. Outside my door, Eleanor's voice echoed faintly, hissing through her teeth. "You think you can escape me? Tessa. Margaret was just the beginning. I'm going to make you understand that you are not worthy of being my son's wife." I closed my eyes, my heart filled with resolve. If she chose war, I would fight to the very end, not for the $200,000, but for my own dignity. 3 days later, exactly as I anticipated, a massive storm hit. That morning, while I was making coffee in the kitchen, my phone rang incessantly. It was the head of HR at Nathan's bank branch. His voice was shaking. "Tessa, the branch audit discovered that over $10,000 was withdrawn from the petty cash reserve, and the transaction was executed from your computer terminal." I was paralyzed. "What are you talking about? My terminal? I haven't touched the petty cash. I don't even know the codes." "I don't understand either. The system logged a sign-in from your assigned IP address at 9 p.m. last night. At the exact same time, the money was wired to an account under the name Margaret Hayes. Do you know who that is? The regional director is demanding you come in immediately." I gripped my phone, my heart pounding erratically. I had obviously been framed, and there was only one person capable of pulling that off: Eleanor. When I arrived at the bank, the entire office was whispering. Judgmental stares and hushed voices battered against my ears. I heard the VP's wife embezzled company funds. God, you'd think coming from a rich family, she wouldn't be a thief. When I walked into the conference room, Nathan was already sitting there with 3 members of the regional audit board. His face was pitch black, his voice as cold as steel. "Sit down. Explain to us what happened." I trembled. "I don't know anything about this. I didn't touch the company funds. Someone used my login credentials." An auditor spoke up. "But the system logged the access directly from your terminal at 9 p.m. last night. Simultaneously, the funds were wired to an account named Margaret Hayes." "Who is that?" I froze. "Margaret Hayes, Eleanor's best friend." I took a deep breath. I didn't do it, but I knew exactly who could have. His mother, Eleanor. Nathan slammed his hand on the table, yelling, "Tessa, don't you dare! Are you blaming everything on my mother again?" I looked at him, tears filling my eyes. "Do you not remember? The day Margaret came to our house, they were plotting to float cash. They wanted to legalize stealing my money. Now I'm being framed, and you can't see it?" He narrowed his eyes, his voice freezing. "Do you have proof?" I swallowed hard. Yes. I had the audio recording of their conversation, but I hadn't dared to release it yet because I was waiting for my dad's lawyer. If I revealed it now, Eleanor would undoubtedly launch a vicious counterattack. I simply replied, "I will prove it, but I didn't do this." Nathan sighed, turning to the audit board. "Put her on unpaid administrative leave, pending investigation. I will involve law enforcement if necessary." I looked at him, the man who had promised to protect me no matter what anyone said, now the very first person to throw me under the bus. I stood up, speaking calmly. "Fine. I will take the leave. But remember this clearly, Nathan. You are pushing your own wife off a cliff." Walking out of the conference room, I heard the gossip swirling behind me, tearing at my soul. As soon as I reached the lobby doors, I saw Eleanor standing there waiting. a thin, triumphant smirk on her lips. "How did it go, daughter-in-law? I heard you got suspended." I clenched my fists, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Are you happy now?" She laughed softly, lowering her voice. "It's a start. But let me be honest, if you had known your place, things wouldn't have gone this far. If you keep fighting me, I will make the whole town believe you're a thief." I looked directly into her eyes, enunciating every word. "Do you think I'm scared? I might lose my job. I might lose my reputation, but I will never let you do whatever you want." She raised an eyebrow, her voice icy. "Fine. Let's see who lasts longer." I left the bank, walking through the pitying stairs. When I got back to the house, I found a bright red eviction notice taped to the front door, stating that the residents were required to vacate the premises temporarily to cooperate with an ongoing investigation. My heart stumbled. She moved this fast? I ran inside. Eleanor was sitting leisurely, sipping tea. She looked up and said nonchalantly, "Ah, I know a guy at the precinct. He suggested it's best to secure the property while the embezzlement is investigated. You should go stay with your parents for a few days." I looked around. All my important documents, my jewelry box, and my bank cards had vanished from the living room desk. I lunged forward. "You took my things." She shrugged. "I'm just holding them for safekeeping, like last time. Don't make a scene and embarrass the family." I shook with rage, wanting to scream, but I swallowed it down. I knew that if I lost my temper now, she would use it as the perfect excuse to literally throw me out onto the street. I walked upstairs, grabbed the remaining purse from my room, and came back down saying softly, "Mom, you can keep my things, but you can't keep people's loyalty. You'll see." She scoffed. "I don't need your loyalty. I need my reputation." I walked out of the house that, just 2 months ago, was supposed to be my new home. The afternoon sun was blinding, but my heart was freezing. I hailed an Uber to my parents' house. When I walked in, my mother hugged me and sobbed. "Oh my God, honey, how did it come to this?" I replied softly, "Mom, I'm okay. But I need Dad to audit the wire transfers at Nathan's bank. I am absolutely certain she colluded with Margaret." My father stayed silent for a moment, then said, "I've already sent the file to our corporate lawyers. They're subpoenaing the bank records. Don't rush. We have to let them expose their own flaws." I nodded, though my nerves were stretched to the breaking point. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of my mother-in-law's triumphant smirk haunted me. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Maria, the housekeeper. Her voice was panicked. "Tessa, I have to tell you the truth. Something really weird is happening. Last night, Mrs. Eleanor hired some guys to rip out all the security cameras in the house. She said we didn't need surveillance anymore. It was so sketchy." I gripped my phone. "Did you see her do anything to my computer?" "Yes. She told them to take it down to the basement to fix it, but I saw them rip the hard drive out and take it away. Everything was crystal clear. She was destroying evidence, but she forgot one crucial detail. I had already backed up all the security camera footage to an external hard drive and overnighted it to my dad's lawyers 3 days ago. I texted the lawyer, "Start making your moves. I want them to know who really set this up." 3 hours later, Eleanor received a temporary summons from the local police department to clarify suspicious internal corporate transactions and unauthorized wire transfers. That afternoon, when I returned to the house to gather the rest of my clothes, she had just gotten back from the precinct. Her face was pale green, her lips trembling. Seeing me, she forced a strained smile. Why did you come back?" I answered curtly, "I just came to take back what belongs to me. And Mom, if you're feeling exhausted, I highly recommend you stop before everything is dragged into the public eye." She opened her mouth to speak, but I walked past her, opened the hallway cabinet, and retrieved my bank cards, jewelry box, and the USB drive containing the old audio recordings. I stopped at the door, turned my head, and spoke softly, though every word landed like a sledgehammer. "Mom, I can forgive you, but the law won't." Eleanor slumped into the armchair, her eyes vacant. I walked out, my heart no longer trembling with fear. I knew this war had shifted from a domestic dispute into a legal battlefield. After the police precinct visit, I thought Eleanor would lay low, but I was wrong. When backed into a corner, she became reckless. 2 days later, local Facebook community groups exploded. Someone had posted an anonymous thread accusing me of being a gold digger, fabricating stories to frame my mother-in-law, and trying to steal my husband's family assets. The post included my wedding photos, my bank account numbers, and the caption, "Rich girls playing the victim." I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. Under the comments, dozens of strangers were cursing and insulting me brutally. I knew exactly who was behind this. Eleanor had just returned from the precinct yesterday. Today, she launched a smear campaign to retaliate. I immediately called Nathan. He answered, his voice exhausted. "I know, Mom is just angry. Can you please just stop escalating this?" My voice cracked. "Do you realize people are publicly slandering me? Your silence makes you an accomplice." He sighed. "You always think the worst of my mom. You don't understand her. She just wants to protect her reputation." I gave a bitter, mocking laugh. Protecting her reputation by publicly defaming her wife? You are truly blind, Nathan. I hung up, the pain twisting in my throat. But instead of breaking down, I opened my laptop and forwarded all the screenshots, videos, and evidence of Eleanor spreading false information to the lawyers. My father had also managed to secure a meeting with a county detective. This was no longer just a misunderstanding. That afternoon, someone knocked on my parents' door. It was Maria, the former housekeeper. She was panting, handing me a manila envelope. "Tessa, I don't know if I should give you this, but Mrs. Eleanor hid it in her safe." I thought it was suspicious, so I took a picture and managed to swipe a copy. "You need to look at it." I opened the envelope. Inside was a property deed transfer document. The current estate was being transferred into the names of Nathan and Margaret. I was paralyzed. Why was Margaret's name on it? Maria trembled. I eavesdropped on them. Mrs. Eleanor has been broke for years. She borrowed $200,000 from Margaret. Now Margaret is forcing her to sign over the house deed to clear the debt. She was terrified of being exposed, so she planned to use your wedding trust fund to buy the house back. I stood in stunned silence. So, everything was just to save the house. Eleanor never intended to keep it safe or make a family investment. It all stemmed from a massive, hidden debt. I remembered the words she spat at me in anger. "Do you think you're so smart? I only wanted what's best for this family." It turned out to be true. It's just that to her, this family wasn't a loving home. It was merely an asset to maintain her social status and save face in front of the neighbors. I looked at Maria and whispered, "You did the right thing. But don't let her know. From now on, pretend you never saw me." That night, I took the entire file to my dad's lawyer's office. The attorney reviewed it and frowned. "If this is verified, this is evidence that Eleanor misappropriated funds and committed fraud in a real estate transaction. We can expand the investigation to civil court, maybe even criminal, if Margaret is an accomplice." My father nodded. "Do it. I want my daughter's name cleared." Late that night, I sat alone on the balcony, looking toward my former neighborhood. Faint lights glowed through the cold, dark windows. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Her voice was muffled and raspy. "Are you happy now? You dragged me to the police station. You made the whole neighborhood look at me like a criminal. Do you hate me that much?" I took a deep breath and replied softly, "I don't hate you, Mom. I just want the truth." "The truth?" She let out a manic laugh, her voice cracking. "Do you think you're so innocent? Do you think I don't know your family secretly wired money offshore? Your dad made a bad investment, lost a fortune, and now owes the bank. You think you can hide that? I just have to leak that, and your whole family will be publicly humiliated." I froze. She was no longer fighting with strategy. She was throwing dirty, desperate punches. It was a complete bluff, but a vicious one. I sat in silence for a moment before saying quietly, "Mom, if you leak that, you will lose everything too, because I have something far more devastating." She let out a dry laugh. "What could you possibly have?" "The audio recording of you and Margaret discussing transferring the house deed to settle your debt. I haven't submitted it yet because I was hoping you would stop. But if you continue to threaten my family, I won't hold back." The other end of the line went dead silent for a long time, then she hung up. I sat there in a daze, cold sweat running down my spine. The next morning, news spread throughout the suburb. Margaret had been brought in for questioning regarding predatory lending practices and extortion related to forced property transfers. Eleanor was temporarily summoned as a key witness. The neighborhood gossiped endlessly. Some cursed them, some felt pity. I arrived at the precinct as requested for a confrontation. When I walked in, Eleanor was sitting there. Her face was gaunt, her hair a mess, her eyes vacant. She looked at me, no longer with anger, but with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I sat down, keeping my voice calm. "Mom, if you are honest, I will ask for leniency. I just want this to end here." She trembled. I was just afraid of losing the house. This house was left by Nathan's father. I didn't want people laughing at us. Her voice broke. I looked at her wrinkled hands, her trembling fingers, and my heart suddenly softened. "Mom, if you had just told the truth from the beginning, I wouldn't have fought you. I never wanted to take anything from you. I just needed a little respect." She stayed silent. A single tear fell onto the back of her bony hand. Then she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I was wrong. I was truly wrong." I looked at her, suddenly feeling an immense weight in my chest. She had spent her entire life chasing status, terrified of losing face, only to realize when she hit rock bottom that none of it was worth keeping. That afternoon, the police allowed me to leave early. As I walked out the doors, Nathan was standing there waiting. His eyes were exhausted, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, Tessa. I never thought my mom would do that." I was so blind. I simply replied softly, "I don't need an apology. I just need you to understand that staying silent is also a form of betrayal." He bowed his head and didn't say another word. I walked away without looking back. On the drive home, the wind blew fiercely, whipping my hair around. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but at least today, I had looked the truth directly in the eye, and I was no longer afraid. But I also knew this wave wasn't the last. Eleanor was a woman who had dared to fight the whole world to protect her pride. Surely she wouldn't let it end this easily. After the confrontation at the police station, I thought things would finally settle down. I stayed at my parents' house, living in relative peace for a few days, but my heart was still heavy. Even though Eleanor was in the wrong, I couldn't forget the image of that woman sitting in the interrogation room, sobbing in despair. I genuinely thought she was truly remorseful. But then, a midnight phone call turned everything upside down. It was Nathan. His voice was panicked and broken. "Tessa." Mom collapsed. "The doctor said she had a mild stroke. She's in the ER at Chicago General. Please come." I jolted awake, my heart racing. Disregarding all my resentment, I rushed to the hospital. Outside the ER, Nathan stood in a daze, his face gaunt. I asked urgently, "How is she?" The doctors said it was a minor stroke. Luckily, they caught it early. But they said she's showing signs of severe stress. If she doesn't rest, she could end up paralyzed on one side. I felt my throat tighten, all the anger melting away. After all, she was still my mother-in-law. I ran into the room and saw her lying on the hospital bed. Her eyes were closed, an IV in her arm, looking pale and fragile. I held her hand and whispered, "Mom, I'm here. Stay strong, okay?" Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. She looked at me, her eyes red, her voice raspy as if she was about to cry. "Tessa, I'm so tired. I never thought things would go this far." I burst into tears and dropped to my knees by the bed. "I didn't want this either, Mom. I just wanted everything to be transparent. I didn't want anyone in the family to get hurt." She gently squeezed my hand, whispering, "I was wrong. Now I just want peace. Please forgive me." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Nathan looked at us, his eyes wet. He gripped my shoulder, his voice choking. "I'm sorry, Tessa. My mom probably doesn't have much time left. Let's not be angry at each other anymore." I quietly nodded. In that moment, I truly believed Eleanor had changed. But life isn't that simple. 3 days later, she was discharged and sent home. I accompanied Nathan to take care of her cooking soup, feeding her medication, sponge bathing her. She was weak, her speech slurred, drifting in and out of sleep. Some days she would look at me, her voice shaking. "Don't leave me, honey. I only have you two left." Hearing that broke my heart. I thought I saw a reflection of my own mother in that frail figure. I cared for her devotedly, forgetting all my previous suspicions, until one afternoon I accidentally answered a call from Maria, the housekeeper. Her voice was frantic. "Tessa, I have to tell you the truth. Something is really wrong. Last night, Mrs. Eleanor got up in the middle of the night. She was walking around perfectly fine. She even made a phone call, talking completely normally. I overheard a few sentences. Everything is almost done. She bought it. Just need Nathan to sign the power of attorney, and it's finalized." I froze. "What did you say?" "She was walking normally?" "Yes, clearly. But this morning she went back to pretending to be weak, even asking me to help her to the bathroom. I was so scared I had to call you." My hands shook. I couldn't believe it. But the rational part of my brain told me it made sense. She was staging another elaborate play. That night, I decided to test her. While feeding her soup, I intentionally dropped the spoon and bent down to pick it up. Suddenly, with lightning-fast reflexes, she shot her hand out and caught the bowl before it could spill. Her grip was firm and decisive, not weak, like someone paralyzed on one side. I looked up. Our eyes met. We both froze for a few seconds. Then, she let out a laugh that sent chills down my spine. "You really are smart." Caught on faster than I expected. I looked at her, unable to speak, feeling like my heart was being crushed. She set the bowl down, her voice slow and steady. "I didn't have a stroke. I just wanted to test if you genuinely felt pity or if you were just faking it. And I also needed time to get Nathan to sign over all the assets, because I was terrified that when I die, you would inherit everything." I shuddered, staring at her in disbelief. "Mom, how could you be so cruel?" She shrugged, her eyes ice cold. "I'm just protecting my son. As for you, if you're smart, you'll pack your bags and leave quietly. I promise I will restore your reputation entirely. If not, don't blame me." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. "Mom, do you realize that what you're doing is exactly what's making Nathan suffer the most? You're trading your son's emotional well-being just to keep your assets." She paused for a moment, then gave a soft, trembling laugh. "Emotions fade quickly, but status and reputation. Once you lose them, you never get them back. You haven't been a mother yet, so you don't understand." I stood up and stared at her for a long time. "Then you can keep your reputation. I won't stay in this house anymore. But remember, the legal battle isn't over. If you still force Nathan to sign that power of attorney, I will not sit by and watch." I turned and walked away. But from behind me, Eleanor's voice echoed, hard and chilling. "You can leave, but I've already calculated everything. Tomorrow morning, the house and land will be transferred to my name and Nathan's. You'll get nothing." I didn't turn back. I just said softly, "You forgot one thing, Mom. I already sent copies of all the documents to the court. The more you do, the more they will see your true motives." The room sank into silence. A long moment later, I heard the sound of the soup bowl being violently smashed against the floor, shattering into pieces. That night, I returned to my parents' house and told them everything. My dad sat in silence for a long time, then said, "You did the right thing. But don't seek revenge. Let the law handle it. People who fake illness eventually expose themselves." The next morning, while I was getting ready to head out, a text message arrived from the local precinct. Eleanor and Margaret were being summoned to clarify suspicions of faking a medical emergency to evade legal obligations. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing the final act of this play was coming to an end. But that afternoon, Nathan suddenly showed up at my parents' house. He dropped to his knees right at the front gate, tears streaming down his face. "Tessa, please, I'm begging you. Save my mom. She really is having a breakdown now. I know she was wrong, but if she goes to prison, she'll die. I'm begging you. You're the only one who can help." I stood frozen, tears welling up, a chaotic mix of emotions rising in my chest. Forgive her or not? Stop or keep going? I looked at Nathan and said softly, I won't hurt your mother. But if she wants peace, she has to confess to everything. I don't want anyone to lose their freedom. I just want the truth restored. He nodded, sobbing. That evening, I received word that Eleanor had voluntarily gone to the police station. She wrote a full confession, admitting to all her actions. Meanwhile, Margaret was officially indicted for predatory lending and extortion. When I held a copy of the police report, I felt a massive weight lift. Part of me pitied her, and part of me felt deep sorrow. That woman had spent her entire life clawing and fighting just to save face, but in the end, the very thing she lost was her own son's love. I whispered in my heart, Mom, if only you knew. There is no reputation worth trading for peace. After Eleanor wrote her confession, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Some felt pity, others criticized, but everyone was gossiping. I stayed silent, not wanting to say another word about it. Despite everything, I couldn't find it in me to be happy. Winning a family war is never a true victory. But what I didn't expect was that it still wasn't over. That evening, Nathan asked me to meet him at a coffee shop near my parents' house. The rain was falling lightly, the pale yellow streetlights reflecting off the table. His face looked incredibly tired. He stared at me for a very long time before speaking slowly. Mom signed a plea deal. She hopes you can forgive her. She also said, if you agree, she is willing to sell the house and pay you back every cent. I took a sip of my tea, looking off into the distance. I never needed the money, Nathan. I only needed respect. But since your mom confessed, I have nothing left to resent. He nodded slightly, staying silent for a moment, then abruptly said, Tessa, I'm sorry. Honestly, from the very beginning, this marriage wasn't what you thought it was. I jolted and looked up. He averted his eyes, his hands gripping his coffee mug tightly. What do you mean? Nathan sighed, his voice low. Back then, my mom forced me to marry you. She was in massive debt. She thought if I married a girl from a wealthy family like yours, we would have a safety net. I didn't dare argue. I know you truly loved me, but I wasn't ready. I was paralyzed. My heart felt like it was being crushed. So you mean you married me for money? He shook his head frantically. No, I did have feelings for you. But it wasn't as deep as you thought. I was trapped between my mom and the bank. I didn't dare say no. And then everything spiraled out of control. I never expected my mom to go that far. I let out a soft, choked laugh. So from the very beginning, I was just a tool. Your mother used me to clear her debt, and you used me to keep her happy. What kind of love was that, Nathan? He lowered his head, unable to look at me. Outside, the heavy rain hammered against the windows, as if drowning out the entire world. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. If that's the case, what do you want now? Nathan remained silent for a long time, then looked up, his eyes red. I want a divorce. I smiled faintly, tears streaming down my face. Finally, you said it. He quickly grabbed my hand. Tessa, please understand. I don't want to hurt you anymore. My mom is genuinely sick now. She's panicking. She just wants to see you one last time. I know you hate her, but she's so weak. Please just come see her. Consider it a final goodbye. I pulled my hand away, my voice choking. I don't hate her, but I have absolutely no reason to go back. He sat frozen for a moment. Then, he pulled a manila envelope from his jacket and placed it in front of me. These are the divorce papers. I already signed them. If you agree, just sign it so we can be done. I'll transfer all our joint assets entirely into your name as compensation. I looked at the papers, feeling like needles were piercing my soul. Every line of the uncontested divorce decree felt like a knife cutting into my heart. I had guessed this day would come, but I didn't expect it to be this cold. I looked at Nathan, my voice dropping. Did you ever love me? Even just a little bit? He paused, then whispered, yes, but too little and too late. That answer made me burst into tears. After years of enduring, after all the trauma, I ultimately lost to the words too late. I picked up the pen and signed my name. The strokes were trembling but decisive. As I stood up to leave, Nathan called out after me. Tessa, thank you for coming into my life. No matter what, you were the person I cherished the most. I didn't turn back. I just said softly, please cherish the next person. Don't let them end up like me. On the drive back, the rain still hadn't stopped. I stood in front of my parents' gate, my mind a tangled mess. My mom opened the door, saw me soaking wet, and just sighed, pulling me into a hug. It's okay, honey. Let it go. Sometimes losing someone is the only way to keep yourself. I buried my face in her shoulder and sobbed uncontrollably. All the years of trying to be strong finally collapsed. The next morning, Nathan called again. His voice was hoarse, sounding like he was crying. Mom passed away. Tessa! She had a massive stroke. She went in the night. I didn't make it in time. I froze, dropping the phone. Even knowing the evil things she had done, my heart still ached. A part of me, no matter how deeply traumatized, couldn't find any joy in the death of the woman who was once my mother-in-law. That afternoon, I attended the wake. At the funeral home, everyone bowed their heads in silence. Eleanor lay there, her face strangely peaceful, as if she were just taking a long nap. Nathan sat beside the casket, his eyes swollen red, perfectly silent. When he saw me, he stood up and whispered, "Thank you for coming. Mom left a letter for you." He handed me a small, trembling envelope. I opened it. Her handwriting was shaky. Tessa, I know I was wrong my entire life, but I was genuinely terrified of losing everything, terrified of people laughing at my son for having nothing. I was so stubborn, and I made you suffer. Thank you for not pushing me into a prison cell and for taking care of me when I was sick. I only hope that if there is a next life, I can learn to love my daughter-in-law like my own daughter. Find peace, Tessa. Don't let hatred kill the gentleness inside you. Finishing the letter, I folded it up, tears streaming down my face. I turned to look at Nathan. We were both silent. Amidst the mourning, all the hatred seemed to dissipate, leaving behind only an empty, suffocating void. After the funeral, I left the city. No one saw me off. It was just me and a small suitcase. I wanted to go far away, somewhere with no ties to the past. Before leaving, I sent Nathan a short text. Thank you for everything. Everyone makes mistakes. The only difference is who has the courage to admit them. Live well, Nathan. I turned off my phone and sat on the Greyhound bus, rolling through the night. Outside, the rain fell lightly but steadily, much like the sadness inside me no longer violent, just quietly smoldering, but never completely extinguished. At the end of the road, I knew I hadn't lost anything. I was just starting over with a heart that had learned how to stand firm after every wound. 6 months after the funeral, I returned to Chicago. Not because I wanted to, but because of an unexpected call from a law firm. The man's voice on the phone was calm. "Hello, Miss Smith. We are the legal representatives for the late Mrs. Eleanor. Before she passed, she left a will, and your name is in it. Please come in tomorrow morning for the reading." I stayed silent for a long time, then softly replied, "Yes, I will be there." I hung up, my heart heavy. I had moved far away, trying to forget the old wounds, but fate was dragging me back to the source of all my pain. The next morning, I arrived at the law firm. In the room were 3 lawyers, Nathan and Aunt Helen, Eleanor's younger sister. The atmosphere was quiet. The faint scent of chrysanthemums seemed to linger, making my heart clench. Nathan looked at me, his eyes tired but gentler than before. The head lawyer opened his briefcase, his voice monotonous. According to the legally drafted will, Mrs. Eleanor, born in 1962, leaves behind several assets, including the primary residence, 2 savings accounts, and an investment portfolio. Everything is divided clearly. However, in the final section, she requested a private addendum to be read only to Mr. Nathan and Miss Tessa. He pulled out a sealed yellow envelope and handed it to me. "This is the supplementary will, handwritten by Mrs. Eleanor and notarized by our office." I took it, my hands shaking, feeling as if I were about to open something both sacred and cruel. I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was slanted, clearly written during her final days. "Tessa, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. I know I caused you a lot of pain, but there is one thing I never dared to say. Years ago, your parents helped me pay off a massive debt. At that time, I was nearly bankrupt, and your father was the one who reached out to save me. I promised to pay it back, but because of my ego, I hid it, turning gratitude into resentment. When Nathan married you, I thought God was taking back that debt in a different way. I always told myself that if you ever left this house, I would pay you back double. In the safe on the second floor, I left a savings account with $200,000, the exact amount of the wedding trust fund your parents gave you as an apology. But the thing I want to say most is this. Nathan is not my biological son. I adopted him from the hospital when he was 6 months old. His biological father was a man who betrayed me, but I didn't hate the child. I just wanted to give him a home. I hid everything because I was terrified of losing face, terrified of people gossiping. Now, if you can, please tell Nathan the truth. He has the right to know who he is. Please forgive me, if you can. I was stunned. Every line felt like it was tearing the oxygen from the room. I looked up at Nathan. He was watching my every expression intently. "What is it, Tessa?" he asked quietly, his voice shaking. I stayed silent, gripping the paper, and handed it to the lawyer. "Please read the last part for him." The lawyer nodded and read the lines Eleanor had written. When he reached the part about Nathan not being her biological son, the room exploded. Nathan shot up from his chair, his face bone white, his eyes wide with shock. "What did you say?" "No, that's impossible." Aunt Helen burst into tears, shaking as she spoke. "It's true, Nathan. Your mom told me. You were adopted from the hospital, but she forbade anyone from ever talking about it. I'm so sorry." Nathan stumbled and collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. As for me, my heart was a tangled mess, half feeling pity for him, half feeling pity for the woman who had just passed away. Even when she was wrong, Eleanor had lived in fear up until her very last breath. The lawyer gently placed the will on the table. Furthermore, she left instructions that the $200,000 trust fund equivalent in the savings account is to be transferred to Miss Tessa, but on the condition that you are the one to tell Mr. Nathan this truth. I looked up, dazed. Eleanor was still Eleanor. Even in death, she was controlling people with conditions and strings attached. I looked at Nathan. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, his voice cracking. "Tessa, what Mom wrote, is it true? Is it all true?" I gave a slight nod. "It's true. I'm sorry I had to be the one to tell you." He let out a hollow laugh, his shoulders shaking. "So my whole life was a lie? The person I called Mom, the person I defended, turns out she was just a stranger." I stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No. She was still your mother. Blood isn't about genetics, it's about love. Don't let this secret destroy the last good memories you have." He looked at me, tears overflowing. "You can say that so easily, but I can't. My whole life, I carried the burden of being the rich kid, the burden of owing my mom, protecting her. Now, knowing I'm just an adopted kid, I feel like I have nothing left." I choked up, wanting to say something, but I couldn't. He stood up, grabbed the will, his voice deep and raspy. "Thank you. Maybe Mom trusted you more than anyone else to give you this task. I need time to breathe." He walked out of the room in silence. Aunt Helen sobbed. I just sat there, my tears falling. That afternoon, I stopped by the old estate, the house that had been the hurricane of my life. On the mantel, a portrait of Eleanor smiled gently. I lit a candle and whispered, "Mom, I told him everything. You can rest now." The smoke from the candle drifted up, twirling like a silk ribbon, before vanishing into the air. I looked around the empty, cold house. The only sound was the wind whistling through the window frames. In that moment, I suddenly felt a profound pity for her. That woman had lived her entire life for status, for her ego, only daring to tell the truth in death. A week later, Nathan called me. His voice was calmer, but laced with an immense exhaustion. "Tessa, I'm sorry for everything that happened. Mom left enough money for you. I don't want to keep any of it, but I want to meet you one last time, to talk about the secret she hid her whole life." I hesitated, then agreed. We met at the cemetery, where Eleanor was buried. That afternoon, the wind was fierce. Nathan placed a bouquet of white lilies on the grave, whispering, "Mom, I forgive you. Thank you for giving birth to me in a different way. And thank you for leaving Tessa in my life." He turned to me, a faint, deeply sad smile on his face. "Tessa, you know what? Even though I'm not her biological son, I could still see in her eyes that I was her everything. She truly loved me. She just did it the wrong way." I nodded softly. We stood in silence as the wind whipped up the dust and scattered dry leaves. Suddenly, I felt my heart lighten, as if a massive boulder that had been crushing my chest for so long had finally been lifted. Leaving the cemetery, Nathan shook my hand, his voice warm but decisive. "It's over, Tessa. Now we both have our own paths. I wish you happiness, true happiness." I smiled. "Thank you, Nathan. I hope you find the peace that Mom always dreamed of for you too." He nodded and walked away. I stood watching him go, my heart no longer aching, only feeling compassion. They say a wound stops hurting when it finally becomes a scar. And I knew that from today on, all the resentment was finally closed. A year after everything ended, I had left the city and was living a new life in a quiet coastal town in Oregon. Every morning, I brewed a cup of coffee, opened my door to look at the crashing waves, and realized I was still lucky. At the very least, I had survived my darkest days. I taught classes for the local kids and wrote short stories in the evenings. It was a simple, peaceful life. Occasionally, I still dreamed of Eleanor. In my dreams, she didn't yell, and her eyes weren't cold. She just sat on the porch, smiling gently and said, "Honey, Mom understands now." Every time I woke up from that dream, I would silently light a candle in my heart, a prayer for the soul of the woman who had turned my life upside down. That afternoon, as the ocean breeze picked up, I went to the local market to buy some fruit for the kids. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Tessa? Is it really you?" I turned around. Nathan stood there, dressed simply in a wrinkled button-down shirt. His eyes were still as warm as before, just a bit sadder. I was slightly startled, then smiled. "Nathan, it's been a long time." He nodded, looking around. "I looked everywhere for you. I heard you were teaching out here. I had a business trip nearby today, so I stopped by to see if it was true." I stayed silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Are you doing okay?" He smiled a light, deep smile. "I'm okay. I sold the old estate and moved out to the country to start over. It's strange, but leaving the city made me feel lighter. Mom is buried there. I still go back to visit her grave every week. Now, I finally understand that the thing she wanted to protect wasn't money. It was the fear of being forgotten." I looked at him, my heart softening. Over the past year, time had allowed all the anger to cool. Hearing him talk about his mother now, I felt no pain, only empathy. We sat down at a small cafe by the beach. The wind blew gently. The waves crashed steadily. Nathan told me that after his mother passed, he tracked down his adoption files. His biological father was actually a man who used to do business with my dad. They used to be best friends, but due to a falling out, they parted on bad terms. His mother, feeling pity for an innocent child, had adopted him. Perhaps that was why fate had arranged for us to meet. I sat quietly listening to his words, a strange feeling of closeness and distance washing over me. Life is truly ironic. People who once caused each other so much pain turned out to be bound by invisible threads from long ago. Nathan spoke softly. "I thought if I ever saw you again, you wouldn't want to talk to me. But seeing you today, I know you have truly forgiven us." I smiled, looking out at the ocean. "I forgave you not because I forgot, but because I didn't want to carry that hatred with me for the rest of my life. Your mom was wrong, but she paid the price. As for us, if we keep living in resentment, we're only torturing ourselves." He nodded, staying silent for a while, then asked, "Are you happy?" I smiled warmly. "I am. Peace is a kind of happiness. I don't need a huge house anymore. I don't need status. I just need a heart that isn't constantly in turmoil." He looked at me for a long time, then whispered, "I'm happy for you. I'm learning how to live like that too." I work at a nonprofit center now, helping orphaned kids. I think it's because of my mom that I finally understand the value of giving back. I looked at him, seeing no more suffering in his eyes, only maturity. The waves that had once battered us were now just gentle ripples. Before we parted ways, Nathan stood up, his voice deep and warm. Thank you for coming into my life. Even though it was just for a short chapter, because of you, I finally realized that love isn't about possessing someone, it's about knowing when to let go. I replied softly, thank you for helping me learn that, too. Without you and your mom, I probably wouldn't know what it means to grow up in the middle of a hurricane. He smiled, a serene smile, and waved goodbye. He walked along the beach, his silhouette shrinking against the afternoon sun. I stood watching him, my heart free of any regret. It was time for everything to finally rest. That night, I sat down to write the story of my life. Not to complain, but to close the book. I wrote about a mother-in-law who loved her son so fiercely it made her selfish. About a daughter-in-law who was traumatized but knew when to stop before she turned into the very monster she was fighting. And about a man caught between love and duty, who finally learned how to make the right choice. I wrote until midnight, then put my pen down and looked out at the ocean. The wind kept blowing, the waves kept crashing. Life is like that no matter how violent the storm, the ocean is always peaceful once it passes. The next day, I received a small envelope from my old lawyer. Inside was a wire transfer receipt, moving the entire $200,000 trust fund over to me, fulfilling Eleanor's final wish. Attached was a note, given to Tessa, to establish a scholarship fund named A Mother's Love and Forgiveness. I burst into tears. It turns out that, in the end, she still wanted to do the right thing. Out of hatred, she had left behind a legacy of humanity. I knew that wherever she was, she had finally found peace. I decided to use that money to open free tutoring classes for the poor kids in the coastal town. Every morning, watching them chirp, "Good morning, Miss Tessa," warmed my heart. I understood that happiness isn't something we look for in others. It's something we plant ourselves after the ruins. One afternoon, I lit a candle in front of a small memorial shelf, set up in the corner of the classroom, and whispered, "I did it, Mom. I chose forgiveness. I chose peace. I chose to start over. I hope you are resting in peace." Outside, the afternoon sun poured down, glowing golden over the waves. The laughter of the children echoed, blending with the sound of the ocean, like a beautiful, complete symphony. I smiled, my heart as light as a cloud. The storm had passed, leaving only peace behind. If this story made you feel sympathetic or helped you realize something worth reflecting on, please leave a comment and share it with the. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next deeply human, profound, and meaningful life stories.